My topic is instant writing feedback in class using Padlet. And my name is Bjorn Candel. I teach English. I've been teaching English for 25 years. And for the last 11 years, I've been here in the UAE. There are lots of triple consonant clusters. HCT, Higher Colleges of Technology, is where I work. And FJM is Fujairah Men's College. So that's my background. And I love very much writing. I mean, I like all 6 skills, but especially writing. But in terms of how do I feel about marking writing, this is a bit like how I feel, because I can spend quite a lot of time with a piece of writing, and I want my students to be able to write well when they finish college or university. I know how important it is when they go to their first job. You don't want them to look like a dimwit who can't spell. You want them to be able to present themselves well. And I know that writing is an important part of that. So obviously I want to do my job as a teacher really well by marking writing and giving them feedback on their writing. But very often what happens is that is a frustrating experience, because you spend a lot of time on it, depending on how you do it. And the students don't really take things on board necessarily very quickly. Here are some ways in which you might have tried to give individual feedback on writing tasks in your teaching career. Very common one is using letters and symbols. So for example, you have T for tens and WW for wrong word. And you might spend even 15 minutes on one single script. And if you're teaching 3 courses, and if they have 20, 25 students in each course and they all write, if they're girls, they do write. If they're boys, they might not write. But nonetheless, you have quite a lot of marking to do, and you can spend hours and hours on it. And then what happens is, well, this is pre-corona. You walk into the classroom with the writing and you hand it out, and the average time in which a student looks at your feedback is like 2.3 seconds, and then they look somewhere else or open their phone or something. So you spend all this time on trying to help them improve their writing, and they don't really connect with what you're doing. Video recording is another way of giving feedback on writing, which has become a bit more popular in recent years. You have a marker, or like a digital marker, and you speak over the writing, and as you go through the writing, you tell the student what to do. Now that might be a bit quicker in terms of actually producing the feedback to the student, but if you're then going to do like a second lesson or a draft number 2 or something like that, it's not that easily accessible to get back to what you actually said about line 14 in the writing. So it can also be quite time consuming. And you want to help the students really well. And also, I'm not always sure that the students understand it. Going back to the symbols, it's meta language. They might not even follow what you're doing. If you're looking at my writing list there, I have 13 different categories for errors. And the thing is, you always find a new category when you start with the next script. So it's kind of also a bit confusing, both for you and for the students, what it is you want them to do. Collect student errors and to ask students to correct them in class is a fun activity, and the students usually enjoy that. But then when you prepare it, that's what happens. You want to be democratic, so every student should have 1 error on the handout, and then they make the wrong errors. You have to go back and look again at the script 1, 2, and 3 to change it. So it can take quite a long time to prepare something like that. And when you do it, it's fun and students are engaged. And I think it's a good way to make students aware of errors in writing. But I don't know how much they retain at the end of the day, and it can take a long time to prepare. So for me, there is an issue of connection between what I want them to do and them understanding it and them doing it. And that's what I find so difficult. So this is what I've written, and I'm going to read the sentence that I've written here, because something is missing for me, or in the past has been missing. What is missing is an instant feedback loop that shows both you and the student that you're talking about the same thing. Because I mean, I can see a writing where there is a space between the last letter of each sentence and the full stop, and I write, please do not add a space before the full stop, but they don't. Or it could be other mechanics of writing. It can be a bit boring, but important, because if you're good at writing, and you write well, it comes across as, you know, you're conscientious, you're intelligent. And also, of course, you want to save time. So what I want to do now, very early on in my presentation, is to show you how I use Padlet in a writing class, because I know I only have 30 minutes, so therefore I want to do the most important part first, to let you experience how I interact with my students online in real time. And that is why I wanted everybody to be able to raise their hands, because I'm going to ask you a question now. I'm going to ask you, how many of you actually used Padlet with students already? Can you raise your hands, please? So you open your participants list and you click raise your hands. I have one. Okay, so I guess everybody is here because they've never used Padlet before. Okay, I got one raised hand. Interesting. Okay, not to worry. I'm prepared for you. That's why I've done it like this. So what I'm going to start with now, I'm just going to show you how I do it in class, and then we're going to do it all together. Okay. So the first thing I want you to do is to open this Padlet. And it looks like this.
Bjorn, you can copy paste that link in the chat.
I will. I'm just opening it on the screen there. Okay. So I'm going to copy and paste it here. Oh, by the way, in the confusion of me looking for the chat room, I forgot to paste where I put my presentation. So here is the Padlet. I want you to open this one, please. I'm also going to give you the URL to my presentation. I have a presentation website, so I'm going to post it as well, paste it as well. Where are my chats? There's the chat. Okay, paste. Okay, my presentation is here. Presentations by Bjorn. You can click there if you want to open it now or later. It's really available for you. So as you can see, I'm going to go back to my presentation because I'm going to show you what I want you to do. And this is what I do with my students. I prepare a Padlet for them where every student has a space, a shelf with their name. Now, I don't know your names. I didn't know who would come here, so I just call you attendee 1, 2, 3, and 4, etc. What I like you to do is to click on the plus sign under one of the free spaces and then write your name. And then once again, click under the new plus sign that will appear and answer the questions at the top of this page, okay? So at the top of this Padlet, there is a question about writing. In fact, I'm going to read them now as you're logging on. So click on the Padlet that you see in the chat room and click on the plus sign under one of the free attendee shelves. Write your name and then click again and start answering the question. The question is, how do you look at the writing skill within your teaching practice? Where does it fit in with your list of priorities? What aspects of writing do you focus on, and how important is it for you to give writing feedback to your students? So I'm now going to go back to the live version of this so we can see what you're doing. So I can see that David and Mahara sharing one. Okay, don't worry. So please answer the question. So Melanie says that they should communicate by writing, but we should not focus on grammar or grammar error. We should respond to content. So Melanie, why do you think that content is more important than grammar?
The reason I think content is more important than grammar is because when I did my training and learning for teaching English as a second language, the book, The Writing Process was very popular. And there was a small short paragraph written by a Japanese student in America. They give us an example with and he said his bicycle was stolen. And if the teacher had just responded to the grammar errors he made, right, would have discouraged him forever from writing. So I think we like they're like like we teach native English speaking children, we teach them to enjoy writing, and we respond to the content first. I do
Okay.
use Grammarly and have the students use Grammarly to find their own errors.
Okay. Right. Yeah, Grammarly is a good resource. So high priority. I don't know if this is David or Mahar, but basic sentence control, capital letters, full stops, and syntax. Is that Mahar or David who says that?
It's David.
Oh, David. So why do you focus on that?
That's just the level that my students are at. Right?
Okay.
They just have to get subject, verb,
right.
This kind of thing.
So the basic mechanics are really vital at that stage.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So a similar comment from Ayman. It depends on the context, but productive skills, I don't expect much until I really bombard them with input. Okay. So Ayman, that would mean level. Is that right? So just like David
yes.
said, just like David said.
Yeah, and also in the context, because I taught in EFL context and in EAP in universities.
Yeah.
So that depends on what level my students are and how much they need English.
Okay, thank you. Sarah talks about positive feedback. To really respond with a positive to begin with. Okay, that's a very good point. I like it.
Could I comment on
yes.
what I wrote?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I've done the CELTA course, and in the one section was about writing, and our teacher said that first. So when we read the writing of the student, the first thing to do is we always automatically think about the mistakes, and that's not correct. So first we should react to the content and say, for example, it could be anything. For example, thank you for sharing this experience of yours. It is really, for example, you know, one positive comment, and then you can point out the correct sentences of the students. For example, well done on using the second conditional, or something like that. And then after that, you can point out for example, you can write like 2 or 3 types of mistakes and say, what can you write instead of this?
Thank you, Sarah. These are very good points. Thank you so much. Thank you. What I wanted to do was just showing what I do with my students. Now, I wouldn't comment on any of your grammar or punctuation or anything. I'm commenting on your content. But what I'm doing with my students in terms of writing is exactly this. I have a space for each student, and maybe whether they're writing the introduction of a essay, or they're writing a whole essay, or if they're writing individual or as a group, this is what I do with them, what I'm doing right now. I'm interacting with them as they're typing on the screen at the very same moment that I comment on it. So for some of them, especially lower levels, like David said, you know, you have to focus quite a lot on mechanics of full stop, capitals and things like that. But as Sarah said, it's also important to give positive feedback. So this is basically the way in which I give instant feedback. And now for me, this has really helped me a great deal, because I know that I can see straight away if a student understands what I want them to do. If I say, can you add a full stop there, and it doesn't happen, I know something is not right. But when they do, I know that they've understood what I want them to do and they're doing it. And that is exactly what I'm talking about, especially now when we're online and we are having students all over the place. Now I prepared for 30 of these because I didn't know how many would come. You can come back to this if you want to at any time and see what your colleagues think about the writing skills. But I'm going to move on with my presentation now. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. So a crash course in using Padlet, for those of you who've never used Padlet, is like a canvas. And just like you did right now, you just click on it anywhere and you start typing. Here you can see some examples of Padlets. You can add pictures and things. It's a free online collaboration tool. And the only thing you get is a URL. So you have a URL for your Padlet, and then you send it as an email or however you're sharing it with your students, and they can add any content they want. Now, the two last points on this slide are the important ones for me, because I, as a creator or moderator, I can edit, change, or delete any contributions, but the students can only edit, change, or delete their own contributions. And for me, that is vital because they cannot interfere with somebody else's writing, but they can see it. So that's basically what it's all about. Now, if you want to open a Padlet or creating one, you go to padlet.com. You can sign in with Google, Microsoft, or Apple, or you can create your own account. And it's as easy as anything, because once you get to your Padlet dashboard, you click Make Padlet. It couldn't be easier than that. And then you have 8 choices of the kind of design of Padlet that you want to make. Now, the common one, and the one that Padlet used in the beginning in particular, was the one called the wall. The wall is a bit complicated, though, because when you get a new student adding their little text box, the other ones jump around all over the place. So if you have 20 students, it can be quite confusing, because you're helping a student and suddenly his or her text box is somewhere else. But that's the basic wall you create. Just a couple of comments on making a Padlet. The first thing you need to do is to edit the title and the description. Now, for writing, I put the task in the description area. Let's say I have a problem essay or an opinion essay. I write the whole text right there and then. There's plenty of space to add the description, and then at the top I write something. You usually get inspired by some kind of interesting arty background pictures like this, or you can change it. A couple of things I suggest you do change would be the URL, because you get one ABC XYZ 123 and it's really complicated. You can change the URL to anything you want after your initial part of the URL. The wallpaper, there are lots of options. Here you have an interesting beige background. If you're a beige person, maybe you like a beige background, or if you're more colorful, you can choose something more colorful. You can also add your own pictures. There are plenty of pictures there, and you can also add your own ones. Now, are there other things you can change settings for? Yes, there are. You can allow students to comment or click or like other students' contributions. But basically, I would just leave that to begin with. Now, here is that very Padlet. I don't know if you want to look at it. It's in my presentation. I think we have to move on. But this is the presentation that I just created right now. I do recommend that you click on my presentation website, which I posted in the chat earlier, and download my presentation, because all these URLs are there, and you can just click on them and have a look at what I'm doing with my students and different things. Now, moving on, if I'm working with my students, what I discovered was, after having used Padlet for several years, and it being quite complicated because I used the walls version. So students wrote, and then somebody else came along 5 minutes late, and suddenly their writing ended up at the bottom of the page and it disappeared, and it was quite complicated. And it was a bit disconcerting for me to actually have a really organized way of giving feedback to students as they were writing. So lo and behold, I discovered something called Shelves. And my life changed, because Padlet introduced the shelf version later on. It's one of the 8 options you have when you build a Padlet. And the shelf option is very organized, just like you did when you were writing your comments on writing and the writing skill earlier on. Everybody has a space. And what I would do then is each student will have his own space or her own space. So this is what it looks like when I work with writing with my students, okay? So here I have an opinion essay, and the opinion essay is actually printed, or I typed it out at the top. In your opinion, should parents give their young children mobile phones, or should they wait until they are teenagers? So basically, each student, when Mohammed opens it, he sees where his name is, and he clicks on the plus sign under his name, just like you did, and he starts writing. And as he's writing, I will give comments real time, directly, instantly, and I can scroll back and forth. And for me, that has changed my sense of not having to feel I'm letting them down by not helping them to improve their writing without having to sit for hours and mark writing and then them not looking at it or not even understanding what it is I want them to do with their writing. So to me, it's hands-on, it's very real, and it's very direct. There are other ways of doing it, of course. Just because you're giving them oral feedback in classroom doesn't mean that you can't give also written feedback to on the writing later on. So here is an example of this. I comment on the introduction for Musa here, and I changed the color of the box there so that he can see that I've written a reply to what is written. So you can do it. It doesn't mean that you can't give written feedback. Can you work in groups? Well, I have done that. Here I worked in groups of 3s with students writing an entire essay about the qualities of a good gym. I asked them to write a 5-paragraph essay about the gym. Now, I didn't know who was going to come in class, so I had to sort of build it up as we were doing it in class. But you can work as groups. Though now during Corona, it might be a bit of an added difficulty to do that because they are like not in the same room at all. What about process writing? Well, right now I'm asking my students to write a blog post talking about having an interesting beginning and catching people's attention and things. And what I'm doing is I'm giving them comments and feedback to the students who have finished a sort of draft 1 with reasonable content. And then I ask them to change certain things. Like, so for example, Abdullah Saeed here, he wrote a really good piece of a blog post, and there was not much to comment on in terms of the mechanics, but he's lost out or missed out quite a few of A's and the articles. So I said to him, let's work on and the, and he had missed 4 of them, indefinite articles and 2 definite ones. So I said, can you find the place for them? So he said, yes, sir. And he tried, and he found 5 out of 6 in the correct place. And 2 days ago, I got this email from him. So working at the men's college for 11 years, I can tell you this is pretty rare. I didn't cry, but I could have done, because to have this kind of feedback from a student who really wants to learn to write and improve their writing is quite an emotional experience, if I say it, if I may be honest. So, but I also can see that he really enjoyed the fact that he was writing. I was meeting him where he needed help. I was giving him feedback pretty soon after he'd written, and then he corrected his writing quite soon after that. Another good thing about that is that if I have a Padlet with everybody's names at the very top at the start of the lesson, I can immediately see who's not working. So in this case, Abdullah Habib, Abdullah Yusuf, Ahmed Suleiman, and Ahmed Khamis, all of them, none of them were doing anything. So I can start calling them and say, Abdullah Habib, where are you? Where are you? Can you hear me? So it's a very nice way of classroom management in the era of COVID, because you can see who is working and who isn't working. Now, how do you set up a Padlet with shelves? Well, as I said in the beginning, you have to create it before you start the lesson. You click on Make a Padlet and you choose Shelves or Shelf, which is the bottom left option. You click on that, and then you do everything else that I mentioned earlier. You set the title, the description, the background. You can edit the URL to make it more easily acceptable, and write their names. And what you do is you click at the top and you add the name, click Save, click Next, add column, and you do that until you've gone through all of your students, and that's it. So my homework for you, if you want some homework, is to create one and send the URL to me in an email, because I would love to see what you're doing, and I would like to see how creative you are and what you can do. Is this the end of my session? Yes, it is. I just want to mention one more thing, and that is the fact that you can print out anything on Padlet. If you click on the 3 dots at the top right corner of any Padlet, you can get an export and a printing function. And the export function in particular is quite interesting, because not only can you export the Padlet as an image or as a PDF, but they also have options like an Excel sheet with everything in a box by itself. So there are quite a lot of options there. So that's it. I don't know if you have any questions. I know we are running out of time, but if you have a quick question or two, I'd love to hear from you.
Quick question. about the feedback. If you give your student feedback, as you showed in a few slides back, will the other students see that feedback?
Yes, they see it.
Right, okay.
So it's kind of democratic and open and transparent.
Right, okay.
Not all of them might like it, but yeah.
Yeah, this is what I was kind of wondering.
Yeah. Any other questions? So as I said earlier, I posted my presentation website in the link. Please download my presentation. I know 30 minutes is not a lot, but all the information about how to build a Padlet based on Shelf is there. And there are lots of links that you can click on and have a look afterwards to see what I've done. And my email is here on the screen, so you can email me as well if you have any comments or questions. Okay, that is it from me. Thank you very much.